Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I'm here with Alicia. Both of us are from Action Together NEPA. We're also representing NAACP and Black Lives Matter Wilkes Barre today. We have gathered some of the local candidates, and we're happy to allow them to present their platforms, policy, and intentions for the public today.
Our candidates that are here today is the current representative for House District 121 and my personal representative, Eddie Day Shinsky. We have candidate for the House District 120, Joanna Bryn Smith. We have PA Senate candidate for District 27, Michelle Siegel. And we have the Congressional 12th candidate, Lee Griffin. We are going to start today with Eddie Day Shinsky. Come on up, Eddie.
Where's Bon Jovi? What the heck? You're going to have to fill in, man. It looks good.
I'll take it.
And thank you. We have to thank this young man for the PA system. What's your name, son?
Darrell J. Thank you again, Eddie.
Pleasure, pleasure. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming out today. So somebody's going to ask me a question? Before you do, let me just say this. I had the distinct pleasure and privilege to be at the Joe Biden event yesterday, and it was fantastic. Why was it fantastic? You know why? Because he is an actual, real human being that cares about people. You could see it. You could hear it. And the one, Representative Mike Carroll, Representative Jerry Mullery, myself, of course, Senator Casey and Congressman Cartwright all had the opportunity to say a word or two. And my basic message to everyone was, do we want to come together as a country, as a people, or do we want to continue this chaos every single day fighting amongst each other? Joe Biden is a guy that comes from northeastern PA, and northeastern PA is where I come from. And what I know of northeastern PA is, coming from a miner's family, those folks working in the factories, those people were all immigrants. My great-grandparents were immigrants. They came to America, why? Because of the magnificent plan, freedom, to give every person, no matter what race, color, or creed, the opportunity, with hard work, education, to grow and become whatever your God-given gifts are. That's the magnificence of America. That's why everybody wants to come to America, to give everybody a chance. And what accelerated the growth of America, the brilliance of America, and the strength of America was what? Diversity. Diversity. Because in each and every one of us, we all have gifts. As a teacher, I would say to my class, you do know that each and every one of you here are special. And the kids would look at me like you're looking at me like, what are you talking about? There's only one of you in the world. Do you understand that? There's only one of you in the world. That makes you special. And in school, in education, that's when you're going to find out what your gifts are, what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and that then helps you become who you will be. That young man that is going to play the guitar for us discovered his gift. Those people that are running for office, for elected positions, have a desire to represent people, a desire to make things better, to do good. And again, that's Joe Biden. He's a guy that came from northeastern Pennsylvania from modest means, and now here he is running for the presidency of the United States of America. That's the brilliance of America. That's the specialty of America. And we, as a people, cannot allow us to be divided over nonsensical, chaotic things based upon false assumptions. And what am I talking about, false assumptions? Is there anybody in here better than anybody else? I don't think so. I think we're all Americans. Some of us have a little more money than somebody else. Somebody else might have a little better car than somebody else, better house than somebody else. Well, that's America. The harder you work, the more gifts you have. Hey, part of it's luck, isn't it? The bottom line is, America gives you that chance. Joe Biden yesterday talked about bringing us together as a people. When we say one nation under God, indivisible, that means we don't divide. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just be fair. That's why we have laws, don't we? The rule of law. We follow the law, because if you don't follow the law, if you made a mistake as you're driving, you're going to get a ticket. If you stole some money, you're going to go to jail. Follow the law. The president, however, doesn't seem to consider following the law. He does whatever the heck he wants to do. And that kind of attitude is, you know what? When you're a billionaire, you can have that attitude. I have nothing against billionaires. You know, if they became successful and they worked hard, that's great. But the billionaire's idea is, you don't like what I'm doing? Try to stop me. That's that attitude. That's not America. Follow the rules, do your job, and we create the things that people from all over the world want to come to. I see now I'm sort of pontificating here, so what's the question?
Eddie, as much as we like your pontification, let's tackle some of the questions here for you.
Okay. It's just that I'm very concerned about the future. That's it. I'm telling you from my heart to you how I feel. And that's the way Joe feels. He respects the law. Okay. All right, let's go. Question number 1.
Speaking of the future, great transition. What is your plan to tackle the climate crisis at the city or state level? This is from Stephanie in Wilkes Barre.
At the city or state level? Well, first of all, I don't think anyone can deny the fact that climate is changing. When we see what's happening in the North Pole, and when we see the kind of extreme weather, 131 degrees out in California and so on, and the violence of some of our storms, the consistency, it is alarming. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we have to recognize the fact that it does exist. If you don't think it exists, then you really can't do anything. So the deniers prevent the kind of steps that have to be taken. For example, on a state level, and by the way, I want to make a clarification point on the fracking. Fracking has created a lot of good-paying, living wage union jobs. Fracking, when it first started, however, was abused. And if we didn't create laws, rules, and regulations, our waterways and streams actually would be polluted. So there was constant, and I don't know if any of you remember some of the things that occurred. This goes way back to about 2008, 2009, when we started to see the kind of pollution that was out there. So this is where the state comes in to make sure that we provide the kind of legislation to protect our water. Water is key to our survival, is it not? So we want to protect it. Pennsylvania is blessed with incredible water, but you don't abuse it. As I look out here, I'm probably the oldest guy here. I want to tell you, the Susquehanna River used to be polluted because of the mine water going in there. We still have orange and yellow streams from sulfur that continues to come out of the ground because of the mining. So water's precious because it's life. We, as on a state level, have to make sure that we provide the regulations and the laws so that we maintain quality water. When it comes to air, we're talking about now, what do we deal with the methane coming from fracking? We can agree that coal was the most heavily pollutant form of energy. And again, you haven't seen this, but years ago, many years ago, every house was heated by coal. Every factory was heated by coal. Smokestacks with coal. And as a result, the air definitely was nothing like what you have today. So it was over time that we all began to understand that there are dangers, and I want to make this point, that you cannot see. You can't see the pandemic, you cannot see COVID, so therefore it doesn't exist. You can't see the carbon or the methane. Does it exist? You see where I'm going with this? So this is where we have to depend on our scientists, those people that are knowledgeable in the dangers and also the benefits of fuel. We need the methane. We need the gas. We need the sun. We need the wind in order to provide the energy. We need the gasoline to provide the energy. But we are, what? Getting ready for the future. And the future is saying, we don't have to burn wood anymore. We don't have to burn coal anymore. Maybe we're not going to have to burn oil anymore. Got it? So we're making things cleaner. And America always sets that bar, don't we? We're the ones that became the example for the world up until the last 4 years. So from a state level, definitely regulations, make sure our Department of Environment is on top of things to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. On a city level, this area here, I think the main thing now is to make sure garbage, trash, that it's collected and it's distributed appropriately. We could see how we're separating our plastics, how we're separating, the various forms of garbage that we create. Also to make sure that our sewers are clear, our drainage is clear, that we make sure that we maintain good sources into the river, not to pollute. Wait a minute. How was that? Was that okay? By the way, Joe Biden said he will not allow fracking on federal lands. He didn't say anything about taking away fracking that's happening right now. Okay? Are you with me on that? You guys are exciting, man.
Speaking of science and scientists, will you back the scientists to control the pandemic? What specific policies will you put in place to support scientists?
I think it's obvious, don't you? Is it obvious, or what could possibly? I have no qualifications to be able to challenge someone who's spent years becoming a scientist. I have no qualifications to challenge what every medical doctor, every medical scientist has stated about this pandemic. What did they say? What are they still saying? And thank you all for listening, because you're wearing one of the most important protective devices that we have. We do not have a cure. Even the process of what we do, how do we treat it? That's getting better. But we're not going to get what the president got if we get COVID. He's the president. He's going to get the best of everything. You're not going to get that. I'm not going to get that. So the bottom line on anything that is technical like that, that's why you go to a scientist to find out what is the status of our water, what is the status of our air, what is the status of this COVID that has killed 226,000 American citizens in 8 months. In 8 months. Why would we not listen to that? You know what I've said to some folks? Every time I turn on the television and they are interviewing someone who is from a medical background, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a doctor, whether it's somebody from the CDC, what are they telling you? Please wear the mask. Please socially distance. Please, we don't have a cure yet. We don't have the treatments enough. Please wear the mask. If you do, we're going to save thousands of American lives. I don't like the mask. I like seeing people's faces. I like hugging people. That's the way I was brought up. But this is saving lives. I would not be able to live with myself if I knew that my negligence, my recklessness by not wearing this were to make someone ill and, God forbid, die. This is not a hard thing to do, people. You can't do that. Something's wrong. And for those people that say, by the way, after the election, there will be no more virus. Well, I'll tell you what, get their names and numbers. Get their names and numbers, because after the election, those 226,000 American lives are not coming back. And we continue to lose them every day. So I pray to God that people just follow the scientists, follow the experts. Please. That's what I would do.
And
I did a little better on that one, huh?
finally, from Scott in Luzerne County.
Oh, wait a minute, Scott? By the way, do you know this guy can cook? He's a musician.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Scott. And you know what? That's why he cares. He's got the heart, man.
How will you support Black lives and people of color?
How will I support Black lives and people of color? Like I support any life. It doesn't matter your color. It doesn't matter your race, color, or creed. We are all the same. God made us all. We're better. We are better because we are all together and we are different. That's why. I don't see race, color, or creed. I see American people. You know what? When you're in a foxhole and you're trying to preserve America's freedoms, you don't look at the guy next to you and say, hey, are you a Jewish guy? Where are you from? Are you Catholic? Are you black? No, we're Americans. 1 million Americans died in wars so we could be free. You hear that number? 1 million Americans died so we could be free. If they didn't go and fight, we wouldn't be here. And by the way, 226,000 dead right now. That's more than all that died in Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, in World War II, one of the worst wars we ever faced, 400,000 men and women died, but 291,000 died in combat. And that was in war over a 3 or 4 year period. We are at 226,000 dead in now 9 months. I don't see race, color, or creed. You are my brother. You are my sister. We are together. Joe Biden says it best. When we come together, there's nothing that America cannot do. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Eddie Day Shinsky.
Mean it, buddy. Thanks, Alicia.
Thanks, Eddie. Can we hear it one more time for Eddie Day? The next candidate we have for you is running in House District 120, right across the river, and that is Joanna Bryn Smith.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I'd like to thank the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, and Action Together, NEPA, for hosting this event, because it's so important. And I know we're here to say that we should be able to talk to our elected officials. We should be able to get to our leaders. And that's the most important part of being a leader, is listening and understanding that everyone's lives are touched by what is happening, especially this year. So I'd like to tell you a story, I promise it's short, about one of our leaders and our future leaders. When I was young, I had a friend who lived in Delaware, and her step-parents couldn't conceive, and so they adopted a child from Korea, and it went great. And they decided to do it again a few years later. And they had adopted their son, and they were told they were getting him this year, or this week. They didn't get him the next week. So they went to their senator, who was Joe Biden. And they told him, we adopted our child, and we can't have him. And this is a very specific, personal thing. And Joe Biden got on a plane 2 days later, and that week, they had their son. And that week, I understood what a leader does, what our elected officials should be doing, and what they should be caring about. And that is something that I would like to run on. That is something I would like to model. And so I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to take some of your questions. Thank you for listening.
Hi, Joanne.
How are you today?
Very good. You had a parochial school education, is that correct?
I did have a parochial school education.
Do you support our public schools, and how do you feel about vouchers?
I absolutely support our public schools. I actually am the child of 2 public school teachers, and when I was in kindergarten, I went to kindergarten at the school that my parents taught, Lake Lehman, but we happened to live just outside the district, and the public school that I would have to go to for first grade was a 40-minute bus ride away. And so my parents, who both taught at Lake Lehman and coached there, and every other child who was a parent who had parents as teachers had gone there tuition free. And because we have had continual disputes over workers' rights and what that means, I was the first child who had lost the right to go to the same school as my parents. So they would have to pay tuition. And it came down to the question of what many people ask and what many families have to do. It came down to the question of what can we afford? And when my parents sat down and realized it was more affordable to send me to a private school than to send me to their own public school. And so they did what they could afford. And I went to a parochial school. But I understand how important our public education is. And to me, education is the silver bullet. Because if we have a great public school education, if we have a great education system, first, our kids are getting educated. And there's nothing that anybody loses when that happens. Secondly, if we can really get our public schools up, what's the first question that anyone asks when they go to a new place or they want to move somewhere? What's the first question?
How are the schools?
Right? I've never gotten a different answer for that. And if we can get our school districts to be excellent, that will help bring people here, which will help bring businesses here, which will bring more people here and more businesses, and it will create a positive feedback loop that will only lift our community up. So I absolutely support public schools, and that is how I understand it. And as for vouchers, I went to a private school. I understand that there is a place for private education, and those decisions often get made because of what works for the family, often because of religious ideas or what is more affordable, like in my case. And I understand that. However, I do think that vouchers are a Band-Aid over a wound that needs stitches. Because what's the question? What do people ask for vouchers for? Because they don't feel that their public school is an appropriate environment, is a good environment to raise their child to go to school. So that's the problem. So what we first need to do is support our public education system. And while I understand there's a place for private education, I enjoyed mine and I would never change it. I learned so much, and it meant so much to me. So I know there's a place for it, but our number one priority needs to be our public education system and close that wound.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From Kathleen in Exeter. PA has one of the lowest rate of women in elected office. How will you use your position to get more gender equity?
We do have one of the lowest rates in office. We are 40 out of 50 states, and we need to change that. On average, there's polls and there's science. On average, a woman needs to be asked to run for office 3 times. A man doesn't have to be asked. But what does that start with? It starts with education. So we need to start telling our girls at a young age that they don't need to wait, that they don't need to be second, that they're just as equal as everyone else. And we need to have role models, and we need to ask ourselves, is this what we want our children to know? Is this what I want to put forth in my life for the girls that I'm a role model for? I'm a young female attorney, and that was not an easy life, and we recently lost someone who's been a role model for me my entire life, Justice Ginsburg. And she did so much work to advance gender equity. But when she was confirmed, she spoke at her confirmation hearing and said she understood that she stood on the shoulders of women who had come before her, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony. And I understand that I stand on her shoulders, and hopefully my students will stand on my shoulders. I'm happy to be that person, and when I am elected, I will work to ensure that we make running more accessible, because that's one of the most difficult things. It's difficult to stand up and run, but for many reasons except for making that decision. Money decisions, financial decisions, gathering the support. We need to make that more accessible to everyone. We need to have finance reform so that it is more accessible, and maybe even recruitment platforms. So I'm excited to be a role model. I'm grateful for the students who have told me I was a role model, and I'm excited to work towards equity, especially for Pennsylvania and our elected officials. Thank you.
And we have one more question from Kathleen in Exeter. Nationally and locally, we have a problem with systemic racism, including stop and frisk. How will you address this?
Part of the reason that I'm running is because I do public defense. And that gives me a very specific lens that I get to see this community in. I get to see the resources that we don't have, that we desperately need. The drug treatment resources, the mental health resources, the early intervention resources. And in order to address that, we need to, again, go to the root, education. We need to start universal pre-K, which I support, and we know the science behind universal pre-K. Children who have had pre-K have a higher rate of employment, they have a higher rate of graduation, they have a lower rate of incarceration. We need to start there. And we need to not ask our teachers to wear every single hat as a teacher, as a social worker, as sometimes a parent and a confidant, and sometimes as someone who has to report things to authorities, as an authority figure. We ask our teachers to wear so many hats. We have to give our schools more social resources, social workers, mental health, early intervention. And then we need to go into police reform, and we need to go into criminal justice reform, because I understand that the criminal justice system reaches so far into our lives that we don't even see it. It reaches beyond any building. So many children are affected by it, and they have a parent incarcerated. And we need to ask our communities to hold themselves accountable and have a citizens review board of our policing, and make sure that we don't ask our police to do too much. Right now, if there's a mental health crisis, we call the police. If there's a drug overdose, we call the police. If there's a dog running loose in the neighborhood, we call the police. If there's an actual crime being committed, we call the police. And that's too much to ask. We should have services like mental health professionals, social workers who work more closely with them, and reinvest in our communities. And I really believe that if we did that, we could start addressing the systemic racism. I really do. If we had better training and asked less of our law enforcement and supported our communities, I really think that that is how we start to address it, because it's a huge question, and we absolutely need to.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Go vote. Go vote early.
Our next candidate is running in PA Senate District 27. It's Michelle Siegel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michelle Siegel, and I am running for state senate in the 27th district. I am born and raised in Snyder County. It's about an hour and a half away from here. I grew up playing in the woods. Both of my parents worked, and so my generation was often raised by our grandparents because we didn't have childcare. So my grandmother would take me for walks in the woods, and it was magical, and she would find walking sticks, and I just thought that was like magician, So the one day she takes me in the woods, and there's trees. She takes me to the top of the hill, and there is nothing. Just looked like a lake. And I asked her what it was, and she said it was death. Now, growing up at my grandparents' house, I knew you could not drink the water. They had Tulpehocken water delivered by the coal company daily. We could wash our hands, but we could not ingest it. When my grandmother finally passed away, that company, my family put the house up for sale. That company came in and bought that land and said nobody could ever live here again. They have destroyed the existence of my family. My grandfather got colon cancer. He was a World War II veteran. He battled that most of his life. My uncle was a mechanic. He started out with colitis. Of course, the medical bills added up. He fell through the cracks of our healthcare system. He stopped going for treatment. His colitis turned into cancer, and he died in his 50s from drinking water in Pennsylvania, people. That is what's going on. I have seen environmental injustice personally. That's why I went to school for Earth and Environmental Science. That is my BS. And I then went into youth leadership. I worked with children from kindergarten through 6th grade, sometimes up to 8th. It depended on, we were there for everybody. And I'm watching all these kids playing, and they're from every demographic, and the parents are up on the wall, and we're smiling, and we're so happy. And it hit me right in the heart. Who is thinking about these children's future in Harrisburg? Who's going to make sure that we have an equitable and fair Pennsylvania again for we the people? Who's going to make sure that we're not playing party politics, we're playing people politics, and get government back to of, by, and for the people? Because that's what's missing. We are supposed to be public servants, not party servants. And that's why I'm doing this. And my little boy the other week, he sat down by me on the couch. I adopted. I have an African American little boy. I have seen firsthand how he is judged above other children. And he sat beside me and he said, "Mom, what happens if you don't win? Will you still fight for me?" This is a 9-year-old little boy. And I turned to him and tried not to burst out in tears, because that's hard to hear. And I said, "Mommy will always fight for you. That's exactly why I'm doing this, because we matter." So thank you.
Thank you for being here today. We have a question from Jess in Bloomsburg. What is the Rural Bill of Rights?
So the Rural Bill of Rights is 10 things that the group of people that are helping and volunteering my campaign, we wanted to come up with a platform that address everything that we saw going on in rural Pennsylvania, which is the majority of Pennsylvania, that's the majority of the counties, that aren't getting addressed. It is about holding government accountable and making sure that they pass legislation that is for the people and not their special party donors. It is making sure we have hospitals and healthcare, because our hospitals are being closed and there's being nothing replaced for them. We are being forced in rural to go to larger and larger and larger areas. They are closing down our hospitals. We still don't have broadband. We still don't even have reliable cell phone service. You're driving your car in some parts of Pennsylvania and you're in an accident, good luck, because because your cell phone is not working. It's about making sure we have public transportation. It's about making sure that we have an investment in public education. We are ranked 46th in public education. That is unacceptable as a mother of a 9-year-old little boy that's in public school. I want to make sure Pennsylvania has an equitable education for all of our children. It should not matter if you live in a more poverty area, a poor area, your child should still get the same education as an affluent area. It's about making sure that we have access to clean air, water, and land, which our Pennsylvania Constitution says. It makes sure that we hold up the PA and US Constitution so that our liberties are protected, so that we, the people, have our rights actually held up in Harrisburg. It's making sure our small businesses are looked after. It's making sure that we have a living wage. That is the Rural Bill of Rights, and that is my platform.
And finally, one more question for you. What are your priorities in Harrisburg? How will you work across the aisle?
What is my priority in Harrisburg? My priority is to make sure that our children are taken care of so that this state is no longer a lagger and it once again is a leader. This is where we formed this country. And it's embarrassing what's going on in Harrisburg. It is embarrassing that this legislature has continued to put my child's life at risk, my mother's life at risk as a healthcare worker, because they would rather play party games. And I think if I got elected, it would be number one is we got to address COVID. We got to make sure that our businesses are protected. We have to make sure that those HVAC systems were installed so these businesses could be open more. They didn't do this. They didn't put the Defense Act in production. We could have allowed American ingenuity to fix this problem, and we squandered it. And I am the granddaughter of 2 World War II veterans, and my grandmothers told me repeatedly that there was a time when this country worked together when there was a problem. There was a time when both sides sat down and said, look, this is going to be tough, but we have to sacrifice. We had cars up on cinder blocks because people donated tires. People were willing not to drive, and we can't wear masks. So I think because of COVID, it's kind of shifted to make sure our schools, our workers are protected. Where is the PPE? My mom has been using the same mask for 8 days. We owe the people of Pennsylvania better than this. And so at this point, I think it has to be tackling COVID, and then the environmental policies, and making sure that these industries that hurt my family, that are hurting families all over here, that coal ash pit in Shamokin Dam has a fence around it. You can't even walk near it. They won't even let planes fly over it. But yet, Black Hawk helicopters are circling it constantly, sitting out with radar guns. What's in our water, people, that they're not telling us? Because I think it's a lot worse than we can even imagine. And especially when my dad told me he went hunting around here and the landfill literally would glow at night. That's what's going on in Pennsylvania. So it's COVID and it's environmental policy so that we, the people, are protected because it is our constitutional right in Pennsylvania. We are 3rd worst in air quality. We are 3rd worst in water quality. And when our Constitution says we have the right to clean air, water, and land from now and generations to come, that means my child has the right to that too.
Thank you very much for coming out today. Siegel for PA Senate.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Our final candidate to speak to you is running for the Congressional 12th District, which is geographically the largest district in Pennsylvania. It basically covers the T region of the state, goes from one end of the state to the other, and down the center, and that is Lee Griffin.
Good afternoon. Does this sound okay? Great. So as you heard, I'm Lee Griffin. I'm running for U.S. Congress in Pennsylvania's 12th district, which is definitely correct. It is the largest district in Pennsylvania. For Congress, it's 15 counties, only 15, including the county I live in now in Sunbury, Northumberland, and covers State College all the way up to the New York border. It's very special for me to be here today, though, in Wilkes-Barre, because I was born in Nesbitt Hospital. And I grew up in Dallas, Pennsylvania, so it's great to be back in my old stomping grounds and to see everybody here again. And it was a pleasure to join yesterday's event at my old high school with our representative and the Bidens and Bon Jovi, and to hear him recognize those of us running. So that was a joy and a pleasure that I'll hold on to. I want to thank Action Together NEPA, Black Lives Matter Wilkes-Barre, the NAACP, and UFCW for organizing this event, and thank you for your endorsement and all the work that you are doing for all of our campaigns for victory in November. I'm a first-time candidate, and the reason I got into this race is because this is the most important election of our lives. And it is going to take all of us doing everything that we can to get our country back on track. And a very personal reason I decided to jump into this race is because I have seen the effect of the last 4 years on my wife. And I worry about the future of my own family, because my wife was born in South Africa. She's of Indian descent and she's Muslim. And the last 4 years, we've seen this ratcheting up of Islamophobia and bigoted anti-immigrant rhetoric. And we decided to take a stand this year for the future of our family, so that this country is a place where my own family can feel welcome. Because the future is ours together. It's ours to dream and build and pass on. And when our future children look back, when our grandchildren look back at this moment, I want them to say that we stood up for them when the time came. That we looked out for them when the time came, because that time is right now. Our country faces some big challenges. Tackling climate change, fixing our healthcare system, and defeating this virus, rebuilding our economy. But that's what's so exciting about this moment. As scary as those issues are, this is where America thrives. This is what we do. America tackles big challenges head on. Once upon a time, a diverse team of mathematicians led by black women put men on the moon using slide rules and chalkboards. There is nothing we cannot do. We have everything we need to take on what we need to do right now. But the most important thing we need to remember right now is to vote. This is the most important election of our lives. Please make sure you have a plan in place to vote early or on the day or by mail, so that we can all hold our governments accountable, hold our representatives accountable, and get this country going where we need to again. But it's also important to remember that our work doesn't end on Election Day. Our work starts on Election Day. Once all of us are in office, we are going to be working for each and every one of you, and we are going to need all of you to continue that work to make sure we are moving in the right direction. So I want to thank you. I'm happy to take a few questions now.
Lee, thank you for being here today with us. From Lori in Halstead, how will you stay in touch with your constituents?
So the question is, how will I stay in touch with my constituents? That's a particular challenge given the size of the district that I'm in, and it's one that I'm excited to take on. It's important for a representative to be accessible and available to everyone who has voted for them, because representatives work for the people who voted them in. We are the employees of the people, and my plan is to be present. We just completed an in-person tour of all 15 counties in the district, and I will continue that in office to make sure that we're holding town halls in every county to hear directly from the people.
How will you work toward economic recovery?
How will I work toward economic recovery? So the most important thing we need to do right now to help rebuild the economy, and the Federal Reserve Chairman has said the same thing, is to pass another stimulus. We shouldn't be holding this hostage until after the election. People need help now. And in this stimulus and in future work that we're going to have to do, because recovery is going to take some time, we need to make sure that we're looking out for small businesses, family farms, and workers who've been put out of work because their industries have declined. That's where we need to put our focus, not just on corporate tax breaks or Wall Street, but real working people and small businesses that make up 90% of our economy.
And lastly, what are the negative effects of fracking, and what legislation would you implement to fix the problems and keep our air and water safe?
So to summarize the question, how do we address fracking? So there's two sides to this, and it's important to recognize that while fracking has brought in money to many of our communities and brought in jobs to many of our communities, there is also, as you mentioned, a local environmental impact from the water that's pressurized and put in to force the gas out. It's important for us to know what is in that water so that we can take the appropriate steps to make sure our water table, our drinking water, and our streams are still in healthy, clean condition. One way we can do that is by removing the exemption to the Clean Water Act so that chemical mix is made public and we are actually just aware of what is in that water so that we know what steps we need to take to address that.
Well, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. Please vote, everyone. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for all of the candidates that were here today. They came out short notice because they want you to hear them, and they want to hear you. Let's have some closing remarks from the president of Action Together.
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming out. I know it's a chilly day. I know that we have had an increase in COVID numbers, but we will also be broadcasting this on our YouTube channel, all of these remarks, so that we can share them out, reach as many people as possible. Before you go today, please stop and make sure that you got a little swag bag. We have some personal protective items in there for you. And also come over and do a quick video of why you're a voter. Because we want to let people know that voting is important and your voice does matter. So thank you for coming on behalf of the NAACP of Wilkes Barre, Black Lives Matter Wilkes Barre, and Action Together Northeastern Pennsylvania.